Week 5 Overview. Madison and the War of 1812. This week we'll cover the presidency of James Madison and the War of 1812. Madison's two terms, from 1808 to 1816, saw the end of Napoleon's career and the rise of a new American nationalism. Let's start with a quick review of Madison's life. James Madison was involved in most of the pivotal events of the first 40 or so years of America's young history. He was known as the Father of the Constitution for his knowledge and leadership at the Constitutional Convention. He co-wrote the Federalist Papers, considered the foremost guide to the founders' thoughts on the Constitution. He wrote the Bill of Rights. He helped to form the Democratic-Republican Party with Jefferson. He served as Secretary of State under Jefferson and was president during the War of 1812. Madison was born in Virginia, the first of 12 children. He was a sickly child and still wasn't strong when he enlisted for military service in 1774. He was a pretty puny soldier. He stood 5 feet 4 inches high and only weighed 100 pounds. He had to drop out of the militia because of bad health. When America declared independence in 1776, Madison helped draft the new Virginia Constitution and the Virginia Declaration of Rights. These became the model for many similar constitutions throughout the colonies. He was elected to the Continental Congress in 1779 and quickly became frustrated with the weakness of the government under the Articles of Confederation. Madison represented Virginia at the Constitutional Convention of 1787, where he was influential in forming the document that was finally accepted by that convention. As an invalid, he had read a lot about political history, and he knew where the government under the Articles needed to change. He also kept the most complete record of the debates that took place at the otherwise secret Constitutional Convention. Madison then co-wrote the Federalist Papers, which are still considered the most authoritative explanation of the American constitutional system. Once the new Constitution was ratified, Madison was elected to the House of Representatives, where he wrote the Bill of Rights and helped organize the Departments of State, Treasury, and War. Although in favor of a strong central government, he came to oppose the nationalistic and elitist plans of Alexander Hamilton, and he joined with Thomas Jefferson to form the Democratic-Republican Party, in opposition to Hamilton's Federalists. In 1794, Madison met and married Dolly Payne Todd, and soon retired to his estate in Virginia. With the passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts in 1797, however, Madison rushed back into politics, outraged at the violation of human rights. He drafted the Virginia Resolutions of 1798 to protest, attempting to organize the states to declare the acts unconstitutional. Jefferson was then elected president, and he appointed Madison as his Secretary of State. After serving out 2 terms, Jefferson made it clear that he wished Madison to succeed him as president, and the public obliged by electing him. Now, during this time, the Napoleonic Wars were still wreaking havoc on American shipping. The combination of Napoleon's continental system, which blockaded Great Britain from European ports, and Britain's Orders in Council, which blockaded the rest of Europe, meant that American ships were being stopped, searched, fined, and sometimes seized by both British and French. The British also began impressing sailors from American ships, forcing them to serve in the British Navy by claiming that they were British deserters. During this time, rumors also began to sweep through the states that the British were stirring up the Indians on the frontier. Although this threat was mostly neutralized by General William Henry Harrison's defeat of the mustered Indian forces at the Battle of Tippecanoe, the Westerners were nervous about the British. War hawks, or congressmen from the South and West who supported war, began to stir people up to go to war with Great Britain. The Northerners did not want the war, fearing it would destroy their economy. Although Madison realized America was not prepared for war, he also realized that many people in the country wanted it. Finally, on June 18, 1812, he recommended war, and Congress approved it, but just barely. If they had debated a little longer, the war might have been avoided. Britain had repealed the Orders in Council 2 days earlier, but news of this didn't reach the United States until after the war had begun. It was one of the strangest wars in history. It was supposed to be all about Britain's mistreatment of American ships, but Madison wasn't about to send the tiny U.S. fleet up against the world's mightiest navy. Instead, he launched an attack on Canada. Madison assumed the Canadians would be eager to join the United States. He was wrong. America's invasion of Canada was a humiliating exercise and complete failure. The Federalists called it Mr. Madison's War, since he was the one who wanted it. Madison did manage to get himself reelected in 1812 while the war raged on, but he paid a price. No other American president has ever been chased out of the White House by invading forces, but Madison had to evacuate when the British burned down much of Washington, D.C. British forces advanced on Baltimore, but were driven back at the Battle of Fort McHenry. This was the battle where the rockets' red glare and bombs bursting in air inspired Francis Scott Key to write the Star-Spangled Banner in 1814. Speaking of music, have your children ever listened to Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, a piece of classical music that includes cannons and church bells? It wasn't written about the American War of 1812, but about the great Russian battle that happened that year. Tchaikovsky wrote his music to commemorate the battle for Moscow, when Napoleon led his Grande Armée to attack Russia. Napoleon gathered his army of over 500,000 soldiers, one of the largest land forces ever assembled. He expected to meet and defeat the bulk of the Russian army near the border, and then winter in the city of Smolensk. The Russian generals, however, retreated further and further into Russia, avoiding any significant battles. When the French army arrived at Smolensk, the city was deserted. It was at this point that Napoleon made the fatal decision to press on to Moscow. The two armies finally engaged at Borodino, where there was a brutal battle. Over 70,000 men were killed. Napoleon followed the retreating Russian army into Moscow, where they once again found a deserted and empty city with no supplies. Before long, terrible fires, most likely set by the retreating Russians, destroyed the city. Although Napoleon asked for and even demanded peace from Alexander, he waited weeks but received no answer. On October 19, 1813, he decided to head home. Napoleon took a fast sled back to Paris, but the rest of the Grande Armée had to walk, right into the teeth of a Russian winter. Thousands upon thousands of French soldiers died on the march. By the time they got back to Smolensk, Napoleon's army was half the size it had been. Many more died after that. Out of over 500,000 men, no more than 30,000 made it back to France. By 1814, Napoleon was defeated in Europe, which meant there was no more need for Britain to interfere with American shipping. All the reasons for America's war with Britain had evaporated. American diplomats met with the British at Ghent in Belgium and negotiated a peace treaty. The Treaty of Ghent made no changes in any borders or possessions that existed before the war. America's biggest victory in the otherwise embarrassing conflict was the Battle of New Orleans. A rough-hewn Western general named Andrew Jackson led America's forces to a decisive victory over the British. Hardly any Americans were killed in a battle that ended with nearly 1,500 British troops killed or wounded, but the whole battle occurred 15 days after the peace treaty had been signed in Belgium. There's one provision in the Treaty of Ghent that's worth noting. Britain promised to return American slaves. Britain quibbled over the terms of this provision for years. They argued it didn't apply to slaves who had run away to join the British forces. Britain never actually did return the slaves, but they finally paid the United States £250,000 for them. England outlawed the slave trade in 1807, after 20 years of effort by a man we're studying in our church history track. William Wilberforce was an evangelical in the British Parliament who labored for most of his adult life to abolish slavery. If you've seen the movie Amazing Grace, you know a little about his story. Ask your kids to tell you more. There was more to Madison's presidency than just the War of 1812. After the war, the Federalist Party faded away. The Federalists had made the American economy a priority, but after they vanished as a political force, Madison took up the challenge of building America's infrastructure. The country was growing more nationalistic. Henry Clay of Kentucky proposed what he called the American system to build a strong, united, prosperous nation called America. This was a significant break from a group of United States, each one of which existed on its own. Clay argued that his American system would foster national economic growth, develop harmony between geographic regions, and provide mutual markets for the exchange of goods and services. That would strengthen America's own production and reduce a dangerous dependence on foreign markets, which always provided an opportunity for foreign interference. Clay led Congress to charter a new national bank, despite all the constitutional arguments that had made the first national bank so controversial. Madison, who had opposed the first national bank, recognized that times had changed. He had learned that America really needed a big bank to do anything as expensive as fighting a war, so he signed it into law. After finishing his second term, Madison retired back to his estate at Montpelier, just north of Charlottesville in Virginia. After the death of Jefferson, he served as president of the University of Virginia at Charlottesville, until his death on June 28, 1836. In conclusion, Madison's greatest gift to the United States was undoubtedly the Constitution, not the War of 1812. This little man had a big impact on the young United States long before he became its president. May your family have a wonderful time learning about Madison this week.